Hey, it's Lulama Anderson and welcome to the channel. You know how I do it. I do reaction videos on politics. So if that's your thing, in fact, not politics only, even social issues, even memes, we can have fun, but mostly it's political content. So if you like that, just subscribe. If you're digging the content, just like the content. I also have a podcast. If you're into podcasts, you can go to Spotify, just follow Lulama Anderson. You can check out my podcast, but it's not really that hard. Just check for Sneeman Podcast. SNAYMAAN, Sneeman Podcast. So you can check that out. But anyways, today's topic is going to be really simple. It's about, the end days of apartheid, the last couple of months of apartheid. Things were going down. I mean, you can even make a movie out of these things. But anyways, we're going to react to it. We're going to see what was happening. So yeah, let's get down to business.
I said, what's up? And they said, they've broken through and they're coming. And then my own security man simply grabbed hold of me and ran.
Pandemonium just broke out in the entire building. Many people on the ANC side, from the government side, all huddled into the government offices. We thought the right-wingers would never dare just march into government offices and start accosting people or assaulting them. And in fact, we even feared that we would be shot at.
The AWB overwhelmed the police, who retreated before them.
An important turning point in this process was when my security guards kneeled down with their automatic weapons pointed at the corridor, and as the AWB people came around the corridor, shouted to them, "Stop."
Ministers were compelled to promise TERRE Blanche there would be no arrests. He agreed to take his men out.
Yeah, it's quite funny that there was an insurrection in South Africa. I mean, you never really think about these things. But the thing is, before 1994, a lot of things are not really out there. They never really talk about them. What was happening, the last days of apartheid, they would never report on this. And that's the real concern in South Africa, right? The mainstream media is owned by the same people who were in the apartheid government. I mean, so how will you get the news on what was happening during apartheid? Obviously, they wouldn't even want to talk about it. So TERRE Blanche and his people just went into a government building. Government officials were hiding, and he was doing his thing. And funny enough, they didn't even arrest this guy. They just said, "Oh, guys, just calm down." And they were like, "Oh, guys, if you come out peacefully, we won't arrest you." I mean... Okay, but it is kind of understandable, right? Because if they were to arrest them, when you are transitioning from the old government to the new government, you want things to be smooth. So I kind of get why they didn't really arrest him, but this is just ridiculous. You know what's the funny thing, right? Is that these people are literal Nazis. They are flags. Literal Nazis. Oh my God. Is it really shocking? Obviously, they were part of the apartheid government, so it's not really shocking that they have swastikas. Their flags, you can see them, that they are derivatives of the, Nazi party flag. It's quite obvious.
The member confirmed that he'd seen the bill for the training of IFP members in Northern Transvaal by the White Right.
Here in the Rand and in Transvaal, there was certain camps where some of the Zulus were trained by AWB instructors.
Another tribal state was part of the alliance with the White Right. Bophuthatswana, known as Bop, was largely rural and poor, yet the main threat to the transition was to come from here. Bop was scattered over 7 areas. Its showpiece was the capital, Mabato. The country had been recognized by South Africa as an independent state, though the rest of the world and the ANC refused recognition. Its president was Lucas Mangope. About a third of its budget was provided by South Africa.
Funny enough, what most youth don't know is that at some point there was a country called Bophuthatswana. So it was basically a mini nation within South Africa of Tswana people. There is, Botswana, the country itself, but they wanted to be independent, like Lesotho. So we basically would have had two countries that are within South Africa, which would have been really crazy. So basically, they are a country which was not really recognized by the South African government or any other government out there or any other country. So they were led by Mangope, so he was their president. So at some point, Mangope decided to do the unthinkable, the craziest thing ever.
TERRE Blanche, who had just spoken to President Mangope, took the call.
And he said, you must not go in tonight. So I asked him why. And he said, no, they are organizing 4,000 men. So I said, I have had an agreement with the state president, and I phoned him already, and I said I will take in my men tonight, so I'm going to take in my men. So I did.
I had a call from Mr. EUGENE TERRE BLANCHE, who offered to come in and help. And I said, please don't come in.
But the AWB were going in anyway.
6700 started here from Vredendorp. The only firearms they had was sidearms, revolvers and pistols.
This man decided to ally with TERRE Blanche. So, like, he decided to ally with a white nationalist. Okay, even though he might deny it and said, oh, I don't want him to be around. At the end of the day, this guy was prepared to actually ally with him somehow, have a deal with him. Eventually, they would have allied and actually did something. And the worst thing is that his people obviously would betray him if he actually allies with this white nationalist, and he doesn't really care. And even his people, there was like a lot of looting because they were pissed. Come on, like, how can you be a black person and ally with Nazis? It doesn't even really make sense. But I don't really blame him to some extent, because the white supremacists, one of their strategies that they do in Africa, right? They come in, they ask you, who's your enemy, right? And they'll be like, those guys over there, they're my enemies. Maybe they're taking territory here, what. And they'll be like, okay, we'll give you guns and you will go and fight those people. That's what they're doing right now with Ukraine, right? So Ukraine is under siege. So they need to protect Ukraine by offering Ukraine guns. Like, so they have been doing this ever since. So it's kind of cringy that even Mangope just wanted to ally with white supremacists. It's like the craziest thing ever.
Mangope denied that right. He formed a pact with General VILJOEN, Chief Buthelezi, and the leader of another tribal state. This alliance of BOP with right-wing Afrikaners posed a serious threat to the whole transition to democracy.
Intact.
But Mangope stood firm. When some of his black soldiers urged him to abandon his independence, he said he had powerful friends. As since rioted and his capital went out of control, Mangope called on VILJOEN to come urgently to his rescue.
He then requested from me assistance for that weekend. I then said to Mr. Mangope that I am prepared to move in farmers for this purpose. Mr. Mangope then said to me, please, as far as the farmers are concerned, I will be very happy to have them, because I believe that we have a close relationship.
So that's how civil wars start. If you ally with your enemy or a person who was once your enemy, obviously they will want you to kill your own people. And with South Africa, if Mangope allied with TERRE Blanche, obviously he would be involved in civil war. They'll tell, okay, we'll make sure that you get rid of your enemies, but you owe us one. So you need to do 1, 2, 3 to make sure that the country is unstable. Or they could just offer him power and tell him, oh, okay, if you do this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you'll be president. If we get rid of the ANC, you are the one who's going to be president. So that's how civil wars start.
You had millions of people who had focused on these election days as the days of liberation. And you couldn't say, postpone the day of liberation because the IFP and Chief Buthelezi are not yet ready.
The government, which had moved troops into KwaZulu, would not budge, and with less than a month to go before the election, Buthelezi was faced with a stark decision if he continued to hold out.
This man decided to ally with TERRE BLANCHE. So, like, he decided to ally with a white nationalist. Okay, even though he might deny it and said, oh, I don't want him to be around. At the end of the day, this guy was prepared to actually ally with him somehow, have a deal with him. Eventually, they would have allied and actually did something. And the worst thing is that his people obviously would betray him if he actually allies with this white nationalist, and he doesn't really care. And even his people, there was like a lot of looting because they were pissed. Come on, like, how can you be a black person and ally with Nazis? It doesn't even really make sense. But I don't really blame him to some extent, because, you know, the white supremacists, one of their strategies that they do in Africa, right? They come in, you know, they ask you, who's your enemy, right? And they'll be like, those guys over there, they're my enemies. Maybe they're taking territory here, what. And they'll be like, okay, we'll give you guns and you will go and fight those people. That's what they're doing right now with Ukraine, right? So Ukraine is under siege. So they need to protect Ukraine by offering Ukraine guns. Like, so they have been doing this ever since. So it's kind of cringy that even Mangope just wanted to ally with white supremacists. It's like the craziest thing ever.
The threat of the country descending into chaos at last receded. Inkatha, the election's last formidable opponent, would participate. To add them to the ballot paper, 80 million stickers had to be printed. More than 19 million people voted. The ANC won 63%, the National Party 20%.
I was able to see Ruth Meyer for the first time dancing on the floor where we were having this party. He was quite happy, he was quite jovial. And I kept wondering whether I would have been as happy as he was if I was in his position, having finally given in the way that they had.
Key National Party negotiators were satisfied they had struck a workable deal with an adversary they had grown to trust.
Oh my God. President Ramaphosa, oh my God. So it's kind of fascinated why these white supremacists were actually happy with the negotiations. That man, obviously they were happy. They had all the land, all the wealth, everything. The only thing that black people had was they could get a good education. Because even now, like a lot of South Africans, even public schools in South Africa, they're pretty advanced, man. Like they're very good. Because in South Africa, there's not much difference between going to a public school and a private, public school and a private school. There's not much difference because the budget of South Africa, most of it is allocated to education. So kids can actually have, feeding schemes at school. They don't have to feel bad because even at school, there's no child that has no uniform. Because in South Africa, we wear school uniforms, obviously. So there's no place for dumb kids in South Africa at the moment. Everyone is getting a good education, and that's a good thing. And also the healthcare. As I've mentioned many times, South Africa has amongst the best healthcare in Africa. And you get it for free. Because I have a kid. And my girlfriend went into labor, right? And she gave birth, and we were not charged. Free labor. In America, it's $2,000 just to have a kid. Having a kid is extremely expensive. So I think the whole notion that kids are expensive comes from that. But other than that, the ANC did their best with the negotiations. But unfortunately, they thought that they did the best negotiations for South Africa and we will be better off. But we ain't that better off. But I can blame that to the white supremacists. Because if actually the ANC does something specifically good for black people, and like, I'm not saying good as in, healthcare education. I'm talking economically. Man, they would assassinate Ramaphosa as in yesterday if he had to do something drastic that would benefit black people. I think I should put a disclaimer. I should say if Ramaphosa were to do good things for black people to the detriment of white people. Let me put it like that. So unfortunately, that's the situation that we are in right now. But thankfully, you enjoyed this video. I just have to end it there. We are in a very difficult situation as a nation here in South Africa. Things happen and we try to brush it off and say, oh, no, you know, white supremacy doesn't exist, we are good, we're working and stuff like that. The most painful thing about the New South Africa is that a black employee and a white employee, they don't get paid the same amount. And the government avoids this. No one talks about this. If we are doing the same job with a white person, the white person gets paid more. It's the most ridiculous thing ever. If we were to really analyze it at the end of the day, it's the most unfair thing that white people can ever do, you know? So, but anyways, here we are. White supremacy has us, you know, at the edge of our seats, and we're just looking at everything happening, and we have no choice but to, you know, lay back and try to spread as much news as possible so that, you know, revolutions can happen. Anyone can form a revolution if they have the right mindset. All we have to do is get more educated and we can form the best revolution ever. But anyways, that's the video. If you liked it, like it, subscribe. All social medias at Lulama Anderson. You know how I roll. For now, sharp sharp.